Hey, so Tim Crawford, CIO and strategic advisor with Avoa, here in Las Vegas at the Amazon reInvent conference. This conference has been going on for well over 10 years. That I've actually been coming for more than 10 years, and definitely the most interesting year yet to date. Wanted to take a few minutes and give you some perspectives coming from the conference here on the ground, and then also from the CEO's keynote. Matt Garman, who's been with Amazon for many years, took over as CEO earlier this year. And so, this is a massive event. It draws tens of thousands of folks to the event. It now encompasses areas all the way from the Wynn, Sands, Venetian Palazzo, City Center, MGM, Mandalay, and now even the stadium. So let's just kind of get into the takeaways from the event. So a couple things. Number one, there are a lot of customers that are talking at this event, and I find that to be really interesting. Not just that they have a lot of customers, but who the customers are. So we're seeing Merck, Capital One, Sprinkler, Monks, Apple. Apple's someone you don't often hear about, but Apple is here talking about their perspective and how they're using Amazon Web Services as part of their core Apple Intelligence offering that I'm sure you've heard about and seen a number of ads on. JP Morgan Chase, so Lori Beer, who's the global CIO for JP Morgan Chase, was on stage again. She's been here before. This time was talking about how they've progressed and how they're using Amazon Web Services as part of their core applications. They're using something like 1,000 of the 6,000 applications are leveraging Amazon, which is really impressive. The CEO of PagerDuty was on stage this morning talking about their evolution of how they've come from their start and then continued on to today. Got to hear from insurance company The Hartford in terms of how they're using generative AI and some of the tools within AWS. Novo Nordisk, these are pharma, insurance, banking, financial services. These are heavily regulated industries. And I think one of the key takeaways here, and the message is pretty clear, is that this is not just ready for enterprises, but these heavily regulated companies have been able to use Amazon Web Services and are continuing to do it, and they're thriving from it. So, often I will, I guess I should say every once in a while now, but I still hear CIOs that will come up and say, you know what, maybe the cloud's not mature enough, not secure enough, not cost effective enough. But the reality is that these companies are able to leverage cloud services and they're thriving because of it. Their business is thriving. Their customers are thriving because of it. And so that's a key takeaway that I think any CIO should be thinking about as they go down this path. So kind of getting into the keynote. So Matt Garman, it's his first time as CEO here, taking over the reins earlier this year for AWS. And he's definitely setting a different tone and cadence for the organization. You got the feel that it's more measured, it's more thoughtful. It's really showing a maturing of AWS. And I think that's a really good thing. Now, just so we're clear, that I don't see Amazon slowing up at all. I see them continuing their incredible journey and velocity in terms of innovation and bringing new innovation to customers. But I think one thing that is clear is that they're thinking more holistically. And I think that's going to play really well for enterprise CIOs that maybe haven't put both feet into the pool yet, or are looking at ways to leverage cloud-based services and artificial intelligence in more meaningful ways. Security. He came right out of the gate talking about security. And I've had a chance to talk with a number of folks within the security teams here at Amazon. And one of the things that's clear to me is something that he mentioned on stage. It's part of their DNA. This is not an afterthought. It's not something that they bolt on. It's how they work. And from the initial planning all the way through to their architecture, the way they organize, And then the execution of providing the service, it's evolved quite a bit, but security is part of that. The second thing is specialized silicon. And this is something I've talked about quite a bit, especially of late, which is, and we heard about this last year at reInvent too, companies that are really thriving off the fact that Amazon has very specific silicon that is a different price performance level than maybe some of the general purpose options. Not to say you can't use the general purpose options, but it definitely changes the price performance dynamic by using things like Trainium and Inferentia. They did announce Trainium 3, which is going to be coming out next year. And as part of Trainium 2, they're also announcing a couple of new instances around Trainium 2 in that chipset, as well as Trainium 2 based Ultra servers, which is, it's like a neural network of these processors. But what's really interesting about it is I think it really starts to show that they can dip their toe, not just in the water, but dive in for those research computing and really big, powerful demands that we see from research computing avenues. Data was another definitely clear message that was coming out in the conversation. I think there's more of that to come, and we'll probably hear more about data and artificial intelligence coming up here with Swami's keynote tomorrow morning. But definitely Matt was talking about it on stage. Artificial intelligence, every conference is talking about artificial intelligence. But here's the thing about Amazon Web Services and reInvent this year. He talked about AI without talking about AI. And what I mean by that was it wasn't a conversation around just do AI. It was a conversation around let's talk about the problems you're trying to solve for and how AI might layer in there. And that, quite frankly, I find really refreshing. And I think enterprise CIOs will find really refreshing because that's the problem they're trying to solve for. It's not a hammer looking for a nail, but rather to say, I need to build a house. How do I build a house? And then what are the right tools that I need in which to do that? But there were some real interesting announcements. Bedrock model distillation, being able to put together your own model and making it easier for companies to do. We saw this in Lighthouse companies a couple of years ago when generative AI came about. They were trying to build their own LLMs and found that it was really a challenge to do so. And model distillation is kind of like that, but it allows you to do things that are very specific to your particular application needs. And I think we'll hear more about that as we dig further into it. The second thing in Bedrock is automated reasoning checks. Everyone's heard about hallucinations, and this is something that holds back a lot of organizations is, do I trust the results that are coming from the data and from artificial intelligence? And sometimes the AI tool will actually hallucinate or give me information that's false. And so one of the things that Amazon is announcing announced this morning was that they now have a solution called automated reasoning checks that actually looks at the result and then assesses whether that result is accurate or not, and then you can choose what to do with it from there. The next one was the multi-agent collaboration. What's interesting about this is when you start to move down the progression of going from chat bots and you're moving to agents and you're moving into the agentic age and you start talking about bringing multiple agents together, because let's not forget, agents do very specific things. Agents are not super complicated, can do a bunch of different things. Typically, agents do one thing, but they do it extremely well. The challenge with that is that when you think about the bigger challenge of what you want as an interface and what you want that agent to be able to do, you want it to be able to do more complicated things. And what that means is you have to touch a bunch of different agents. And historically, that's been, granted, it's not a long history yet because we're just starting down this path, but that orchestration is really challenging to do, that agentic orchestration. And so Bedrock multi-agent collaboration is intended to be kind of like a super agent that will help orchestrate the automation for other agents. A Along the same lines, kind of moving into foundation models. I mentioned about model distillation, which I'm looking forward to digging a little further into. But they also announced some new foundational models, the Nova series of models, and there are 4 different ones that they talked about. And within those 4 models, they're essentially able to take text, speech, images, and video and do some really interesting things with them. Text is the first out of the gate. It's really easy to work with, kind of similar to how you might use other models publicly, like ChatGPT or Gemini. Although you can use those to do images as well now. But eventually, they're looking to do any to any. So being able to take things from one type or one mode of data and be able to produce it into a different mode. So that'll be interesting, especially as you talk about maybe taking text to speech or text to video or taking images and turning that into a video. So we'll see how this evolves. Like I said, text is the first out of the gate, but speech, images, and video are coming in short order. Now, let's get to a couple things that are what I think are really interesting coming from Amazon for a couple of different reasons. Number one is around Q Business, QuickSight, which are not new. Those are not new products. But I do think they represent a new shift, relatively new shift for Amazon to really kind of dig further into creating business value through dashboards and integration and insights from the data. What is new is a product called Q Business Automate. And Q Business Automate is intended to automate business workflows. So just imagine you have a workflow that you've defined, not necessarily just an application workflow, but a business workflow. And I think that's an important distinction here. And you want to be able to take that and automate it. And so there are other tools on the market today and other vendors that are looking to do similar types of things. What'll be interesting is how Amazon parlays Q for Business and QuickSight and kind of layers in the Q Business Automate functionality and that workflow automation into the mix, because you have to understand the business context in order to really kind of do that well. There were a couple of what I called third rail topics in the sense that these are hot topics for CIOs today. And number one on the list is VMware. There are a lot of questions that came up and a lot of concern as part of the acquisition of VMware by Broadcom. And then, of course, we've all heard about the license increases that came with it. And so a couple things that Amazon announced as part of the keynote this morning that I thought were particularly interesting is Q transformations for VMware and Q transformations for mainframes. And essentially what it's trying to do is for those customers that if they want to get out of the data center business, which I think that in its own right is, kind of warrants its own conversation. But let's say, for instance, you want to reduce your VMware footprint or completely eliminate it, or you're ready to move beyond what the mainframe is currently offering you. What the Q transformation tools are intended to do is essentially evaluate, and again, using artificial intelligence, but evaluate your existing application and then essentially transform that into an application that is cloud native. And so it's essentially moving a function that might exist within a virtualized or mainframe environment and being able to move that into cloud natively. So one thing I did clarify, this is not about putting a wrapper around it. Some have kind of taken an approach in the past of let me encapsulate those applications and move them into cloud. We saw that right in the early days of cloud many moons ago. That is not what this is. This is actually looking at the application itself, ascertaining how it works, what it needs to do, and then being able to respond to it. So that's going to be really interesting, and I'll be interested to see some of the reactions from customers on those, specifically the Q transformations for VMware. There was also some conversation around SageMaker. Bedrock and SageMaker have been just darlings of Amazon Web Services since they hit the ground and came out publicly. SageMaker is getting a refresh, and which I think it's time for that. So that's good to see. They also announced the Unified Studio and Lakehouse for SageMaker. And why that's interesting is that the Unified Studio allows you to bring a number of different tools into SageMaker to be able to touch different types of data and then ostensibly be able to derive insights from that. And then Lakehouse, in turn, is intended to do that as well from its own perspective. So again, these are two that I want to dig a little deeper into, but on the surface, it's really compelling and really kind of interesting and worth a second look. And especially as you kind of bring this full circle back to where I started the conversation around the customers that are on stage and along the sidelines talking about what they're doing with these tools. It's really impressive to see how they're able to bring different types of data together, glean insights. And mind you, not all of this is an efficiency play. It's not as simple as saying, okay, well, we're trying to do something faster or cheaper. In one case, one customer said, that wasn't our priority. And actually, that's not the biggest value add for us. The biggest value add comes from a different avenue. So I think that's going to be important to think about when you look at this holistically. So why should CIOs care? I think there are a couple things to take away so far from reInvent. Number one is there's a market shift away from, hey, we're producing 150 new tools this year, to let's talk about how people are using the tools and the business outcomes, not technology outcomes, the business outcomes that they're getting from using those tools. I think that's important, an important distinction. And as I mentioned, I think it also shows a maturing of AWS. So they're continuing on the velocity of innovating and bringing new technology to market, but they're definitely being more thoughtful about it. And I think that's a good move for them, and that'll be a great move for customers. The second piece to that, and why CIOs should care, is they're addressing more complicated business problems. You know, historically, Amazon was seen as they've got all of these great tools, an amazing portfolio that's both wide and deep, and they still have that. But one thing they're clearly doing is starting to put some of these pieces together in a way that solves some of these harder to come by or harder to solve business problems. And historically, that hasn't necessarily been Amazon's MO. But again, it's something where I think customers are at a point where they absolutely need that. And it's good to see that Amazon is coming to the table with it. So that's kind of my summary so far, coming out of the keynote with the CEO and a number of customer conversations. But I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts. And as I have more commentary and perspective, definitely follow me on the web, follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Blue Sky. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you and get your perspective on this too. And let me know, do you find this commentary in these videos useful or not? Or what would you like to see? And so look forward to engaging with you soon. And if you're at the conference and see me, definitely pull me aside. I'd love to meet you as well. All right, so that's it for now. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.